Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Techstrong Unplugged Podcast. I'm your host, Natan Solomon, and on this show, we talk about all things tech, but we're really focused on the ways our digital world is transforming and how we can keep up with it. On the last episode, we welcomed Brandon Prue to the show, and we discussed how you can use Python to kickstart your career. Since then, NASA extended Brandon an offer, and he's well on his way to his dream job. The lesson I learned from Brandon is that it doesn't matter where you come from, the circumstances that you're in, or even the base of knowledge that you currently have. The world as we know it is constantly being shaped by technology, and it's our job to keep up. Code, AI, large language models, these are concepts we've all heard of, but what do they really mean? What do they do? How can I understand and use them to my advantage? Today, we'll be diving into all of this and more. In this episode, I'm excited to welcome my good friend Sean Sullivan to the show. When Sean came into college, he didn't have much of an interest in AI, coding, or tech. He didn't really understand it, and he didn't see how he could benefit from it. Although, as someone who's interested in business, Sean realized that coding and AI could solve a lot of problems for a lot of people. He began learning more about how he could leverage these tools to craft solutions. Now, he's working on numerous projects, leading multiple teams, and is a prime example of how business and technology can collide. Sean, welcome to the show.
And Natan, thanks for having me.
Of course. So just to start, Sean, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and where you're at now.
So the background with respect to computer science was in high school. Our high school had academies, and one of them was computer science. So I did that all 4 years. I didn't learn a lot in that class for all 4 years. Kind of screwed around and didn't really want to learn. The teacher was great, but I had no motivation to learn. I'd rather play cool math games all day. So that's what I did. And so the real beginning of me getting into tech was like sophomore year. I was just bored and I thought I should learn how to code. So I started taking a Python course on YouTube, and it's like a 9-hour video. It's free. And about like 7 hours into that video, it took like over 2 weeks to finish, but like a week and a half into the video, I was like, there's no way for me to use this right now in my life other than like finding a problem and solving it, because it's just like a tool to solve problems. And obviously I have a big like business sense, like you introduced. And so businesses are just effective like problem solving machines. And so being able to solve problems using code is like a really valuable skill. And so I started thinking of like problems to solve. And ever since then, that's what coding's been to me.
Right. And when you say that businesses are really just problem solving machines, how do you think that how these businesses are using coding is intertwined with that business like problem solving solutions there?
How is coding intertwined with the business solving processes?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of, since computers are relatively new to like humanity, there's like a lot of problems with it, and it's growing at a very fast pace. And so when you're in the space, there's a lot of problems. There's problems everywhere if you look in the right places. And so great businesses solve the problems, and they solve them early, and they solve them in a good way. People wanted computers in their pockets, so Apple made computers in your pocket. Like Microsoft's made Excel, which is a huge problem solver. And coding is definitely intertwined in that. But businesses have been solving problems for as long as businesses have been around. That's all they do is solve problems. People pay them to solve their problems for them. And coding is just another method of doing that.
And so you said you learned mainly about coding your sophomore year. What has the progression since then been with like, you had that base knowledge of whatever you learned in that 9-hour video. Where have you kind of gone since then throughout college?
It's been exponential. With other things that I've done, they've usually been like linear, like learning graphic design and stuff. They've been linear. They've been really useful tools over my life. But coding, for some reason, it showed me like so many problems that I just kind of dove really deep into it. And I'm still not a great coder by no means. I'm not like a software developer guru in any way. Like I wouldn't even market myself as a software developer. But I would say that I dove really deep into the tech space after learning, because there's so much to learn. You can learn for a lifetime in the tech space. And there's just so many different fields within it. it's kind of crazy. But yeah, the learning has been exponential. And that's all I look into now. That's all I learn about today.
Right. And as you've gone through as a student, what have you done specifically in college to support this interest? Has there been any steps you've taken to sort of learn more? Any sort of involvement you've had?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest things you have to do by yourself, it takes a lot of self-discipline just to learn by yourself. But I mean, the biggest motivations for me are just, finding problems in my life. Now I see problems in like that I wouldn't have seen beforehand. I would say like this website, I'm going to run a website, like this website isn't good. I can make this thing better. Just having that confidence and just knowing how things work, I guess, is like really cool, really interesting. And so that's a huge motivation factor. And then starting a new project. If you want to learn how to code, just start a project. Just be like, I have this idea I want to do, and just learn how to do each step of that idea. And by the end of it, you'll know how to do coding for that specific niche. And so that's kind of that's the route I took, is just building project on project on project. And I'm really good at making those projects. I'm not good at the broad sense. I've never taken any coding classes really, other than like in school, other than that one I took at the beginning. Other than that, I'm just learning by myself and just going as I go. But good resources, people to learn more about the tech space and coding, I guess, is YouTube for tutorials, Hacker News for like the top news and like new things. And then X, I mean, Twitter is like a cool place to see like very well-off, prominent people just speaking their mind in like a small space, which is pretty cool.
Right. And we're both students at the University of Florida, and we're somewhat known as leaders of the AI initiative on a national scale. And I know you're involved in the AI Club. Can you just talk a little bit about that, what that experience is like, what you've gained from that?
Yeah, that's been a fun experience. So I joined the AI Club last year, so 2023, last spring, and this ChatGPT came out November of 2022, and the world was kind of like, wow, this is going to change the world in some way. And so I started looking into it as well, and I was actually one of the first users of LangChain, and I just started building apps right away with it. And so I realized that, yeah, UF markets itself as like we're the top AI university, right? And I was like, what does that really mean? I'm not really seeing that be done in the classes that I'm in. I've taken like basics of artificial intelligence and like philosophy and ethics and AI. And I wasn't really learning anything in those classes. It was kind of, I learned on my own. And so I was like, where is this number one university in AI? Like, where can I find these resources at? So the reason we market ourselves like that is because we have like a supercomputer, and that's really good for like training models and running models too. That's really good for that. But not a lot of students know how to get access to it. And again, the AI like classes are very basic, extremely basic. And so literally, if you go to the first meeting of the AI Club every semester, they start out with saying, we started this club because the classes here kind of suck for AI. So this is a resource where people can actually learn and apply AI to apps or to explore new things, research projects, and just talk with other people interested in it. It's kind of like we're kind of making our own class for it in a lot of ways. There's a lot of micro classes inside of it too, like for machine learners or for AI apps. There's a broad range of apps being made in the AI Club.
Right. And as I mentioned when I introduced you, you're leading multiple projects as part of this club. What did you say your title was with the AI Club again?
So I guess I'm an applied lead. I've led 3 projects. I'm leading one right now. The first one was Introduction to RAG. This was a year ago. It was spring 2023. As I said, ChatGPT just came out. This is brand new stuff. Being one of the first users of LangChain, I was like, wow, RAG is going to like kind of like change the environment, the app, I guess the market of AI. This is like how the apps are being made. And so I started a team that I pretty much just kind of taught them what RAG was for a semester. The idea was to like progress in the field, but they were kind of like the 5 people in my group were kind of so far behind and like kind of more focused on classes that it was very hard to like lead them into like progressing the field forward. So I kind of just ended up just teaching them and giving my resources that I had. And then last semester, the project got way cooler. I kind of learned more about how to lead a group and what I wanted to work on. And so I found this really cool paper about an AI, like multiple AI agents controlling a desktop computer. And so I wanted to make a self-operating computer where you pretty much give the AI a task and it controls your computer and then like has every permission that a human has and then goes off and does it. And so I started a group to do that. And we actually ended up doing it, but ours wasn't very good. There's one on the market called Hyperwrite that was like really cool if you guys want to try it out. And it pretty much does that. It does it in the browser. My idea was to do it on the entire desktop so I can use like Excel, like in apps and stuff. There's a lot of issues with it. Like you don't want an AI going off and like sending $100 to someone. You don't like want it to do that. And then it's not very good right now and it's costly and it takes a lot of time. So there's a lot of problems, but those problems are coming down, like cost and time are coming down. We could see that happening. And then performance was kind of subpar. It wasn't very good, and then at the end of the day, we made it. And I was like, there's this option on the market right now that kind of does what we want to do. And I don't even want to pay for that. So this isn't going to turn into a business right now, but I think it will be in the future of some sort. I think that's where Copilot's going as well.
Right. And just to backpedal a little bit, we talked about RAG. Could you just explain RAG a little bit for those who might not?
Yeah. And so my project right now is actually with RAG. This is more applied RAG. So RAG is retrieval augmented generation. And that essentially means you retrieve documents from a database, you put them into your query, and then the AI augments them and then generates an answer. So a good use case for like a good way to visualize this is kind of, let's say like Chegg had an AI and they had all of their questions and answers in a database and they connected that database to this RAG pipeline, we'll call it. And someone asked Chegg AI a question. What RAG would do is it would get the most relevant question and like explained answer from Chegg and put that into the prompt along with the user's question. And that's what the AI would see. AI would see the user's question and then the Chegg answer to that question ideally and an explanation of how to solve it. So RAG is essentially just giving relevant information to the LLMs because they're only trained to a certain point. They hallucinate, they get incorrect answers, and they're not trained on external data. So like business confidential data, they can't be trained on that stuff. So it's extending the data capabilities of RAG, of the LLMs, which is like kind of seen as the biggest opportunity in AI in a lot of ways. And so what I'm doing right now in my group is we're trying to figure out how to set this up for technical documentation. So like instructions on how to use software services. How do we put that into a database and then have an AI that's like an expert at that stuff? And so that's been really fun and interesting. And we're kind of doing groundbreaking stuff with that. And I'm excited to keep building with them.
Just to maybe make this a little bit more applicable, because RAG, based on what you just said, seems very useful. What might be a specific use case for someone who doesn't know about code? They're not building this LLM. They're not even training one per se. But what would you say? How could RAG be a useful concept to understand for someone who's not an expert?
I mean, yeah. So like when you chat with like all the AIs that say chat with PDF, that's just RAG. It's just embedding the text, which means it puts a number to the text and then it puts a number to your query. And then it looks up the most relevant numbers from the query to the text. So, it looks at the most relevant numbers from the text to the query, and it returns that information into the prompt and then gives that to the LLM. And so when you chat with the PDF, that's the way that it really works. And so consumers are going to be using this. They're going to be using RAG for a long time. And it might seem like a black box and kind of like this magical thing, but that's how it works.
Right. And so a lot of the stuff that we've talked about seems advanced, right? And mainly my question is, if we're looking at someone who just came into college, they're coming, they just, acceptances just came out, they're coming up to campus. You said you started your sophomore year. What would you say to someone? How can they get themselves in the best position in terms of understanding tech, code, AI? What should they know? What should they prioritize? And how do they keep building that knowledge base so that they can just put themselves ahead of everybody else?
So with ChatGPT, it's really good. When I started learning, I didn't have ChatGPT, which has some pros to it because you don't rely on it. Right now, if you just make sure you don't rely on it when you're learning right now. So it might be beneficial to take like small, the 9-hour free video on YouTube and kind of follow along. Do that first, step one. And that video is going to kind of suck, but you got to get through it and you got to actually learn and absorb the information. And that'll give you a great foundation for what's going to happen after that. After that, if you want to get into AI apps, I would look into LangChain, go to their templates, and then just try to run one of their templates. And what a template is pretty much just like an app ready to go that can run on your computer. And so just running one of those will give you some practice, and you'll run into a lot of roadblocks. And a lot of coding is just overcoming roadblocks. So just learning how to overcome roadblocks, and then you have an actually deployed app. So that'll give you some motivation to keep going forward and be like, wow, I can make something like this. And so that helps me a lot. It's like making a project. And then I'm like, wow, I can make this, I can edit it, I can make it better. And that's my approach. So like get a good foundation of learning from a class and then make a project or solve a problem in your life. The best thing is to solve a problem in your life, but try a template first from LangChain or just watch YouTube videos. Everything's on YouTube.
Right. And we're talking about a lot about LangChain. Could we just maybe dive into what that is, why it's useful, and just the intricacies of that?
Yeah. So LangChain is it's mainly a Python library, which means it's like a coding library written in Python that allows you to make like AI apps. So it takes the API, which is like the remote way to call ChatGPT or any other large language model. There's a bunch of them. And it lets you customize the entire thing. There's so many intricacies that you can customize. It's crazy. When you use ChatGPT, you don't really realize it. Like, for example, like chat memory. So like when you're having a conversation with ChatGPT and the second message you say refers to the first message, that's just chat memory. And like, that's kind of like not easy to implement. And like streaming, which means like, it looks like ChatGPT types out its words, like word by word. That's kind of intricate to implement too. And so it's interesting to learn about that stuff and then to make your own stuff with it too. And the two main ways that, I guess why this is important is because like mostly every company that's kind of big has been like, and this is probably especially important to DevOps, they've been like, we're going to implement AI. AI was the buzzword of last year. And every company invested so much money into AI. So what does implementing AI mean? It actually means setting up RAG or fine tuning. Those are kind of the two options. Fine tuning is kind of telling the model how you want it to act, like how you want it to format its responses. So you give like a fake conversation of your ideal responses given an input, and you give like 1,000 messages of this fake conversation, and you fine tune it on those messages. And the other approach is RAG, and you can do both, but so it's like extending your own database because it covers a bunch of data to these LLMs. And so all these companies have invested so much money into this, and they're kind of realizing that the field's so new that it's actually not very good right now. And there's a lot of room for improvement. So that's why it's so fun and interesting to me, actually, because there's a lot of things to do and a lot of things to fix.
Right. And the other thing, and I think this is probably the most digestible thing for college kids, but also just people who might not have the most technology, is how people are using ChatGPT, generative AI in general, but specifically ChatGPT. It's as easy as looking up ChatGPT, going on, asking it something. And I think that's the extent to which most people are using it. I need help with something, I'm going to ask it a question. My question is, how can people maximize their use of ChatGPT? And what is maybe a next step past that, a tool that's as easy to use with similar power, if there is one? But how would you say people can maximize their use of AI in general?
So it all depends on what you're going to ask it. For ChatGPT, it's really good at writing right now. But for question answering, it's not very accurate with a lot of things. It's about like 70 to 80% accuracy, actually, which is actually really bad. And the best way to use it is to get your prompts right. So I guess the classic example is you first define its role, which is like you are an expert in this and this, whatever you're going to ask it. You're an expert in software development. You're an expert in journalism. And then you ask your question. And then a good another trick too is just at the end of the message, say, think step by step, or take a deep breath and think through the problem. And that actually is a lot of papers on how that's proven to be better results. But I think that soon we're going to start seeing more specialized ChatGPTs for more special use cases. There's some coding ones coming out that are really good. And they like use RAG on like all of the code hosted on GitHub, which is like a huge code repository, a bunch of code. And so it can actually like see your code and then have that context of what you're working with and build upon that. And I think like for a normal user, you kind of just have to wait for the next cool thing to come out, the next breakthrough thing. I think you'll know when it comes out. ChatGPT 4 is the best at the broad things right now, but I think that there will be more models that are just specialized rather than one model that is just like can do it all. That's just my take on it. But for people, it depends on your use case. Just ask ChatGPT, I guess. I use it still for a lot of things, but yeah.
So here's a use case. Use an example, and this might be the one that I hear most commonly outside of write this essay for me. The thing that I hear most is that, well, most things, products, you want a website to back it. I have an idea. Oh, let me make a website. I will have a tutoring service. Let me make a website, something like that. Would you say that ChatGPT is the best tool for building a website? Would you say that it can help you with some of the bits and pieces here? Or what would you say would be best for that?
Right now, if you want to build a website and you don't know how to code, you want to hire a freelance developer and use ChatGPT to help edit code, but I don't think you should use it to write from scratch. There's an app called Small AI, SMOL.ai, that can write a small app for you. It can write the entire app for you, and that's pretty much done through like iterations. So ChatGPT is done from question and then output, and it's not going to output an entire website. It might output a homepage, a landing page, but there's so many intricacies to building a website. You have to host it on a server somewhere. You have to build a backend. You have to build functionality, and it can't do all those things. So the only way that's going to be possible in the future is going to be like having it iterate over itself. But we are trending towards that. I think we'll have that in the next year or two, maybe probably 2 years. Actually, can build a whole website, and that's like kind of a lot. I'd be surprised if we can build a whole website in 2 years, actually. But coding has been difficult for it. It's been a little inaccurate, and part of that is due to coding being updated so frequently. And ChatGPT's update date was April. It actually sets it back a lot. GitHub Copilot's been good because it can understand, it pretty much just finishes your sentence. I guess, yeah, knowing how to code is really important, because if you don't know the intricacies of it, something could seem really easy and it's actually extremely hard, or you could be onto a really good idea. And so that's what comes down to a Google search and actually just learning. Just doing the work is the hard part.
We started by talking a little bit how you got into coding your sophomore year, but just to circle back a little bit, you also told me about an internship you had at JM. Could you talk a little bit about that and maybe how AI or tech in general played a role in that?
Yeah. So, well, one of the first reasons I started learning how to code was because I didn't want a job. I kind of want to work for myself. I heard all these like billionaire stories, just like kind of working for yourself, and that's their life. And that sounded like a great life to me. It still does. But I kind of want to get an internship as a safety net. And so I applied to JM Family, which is they distribute Toyotas to Southeast America, and pretty big company, pretty crazy. It's located near where I live. And so I actually got an internship there, and it was pretty competitive. But I learned a lot, and that was pretty awesome. I was a business analyst, so I kind of made like dashboards for Excel sheets. And I guess like for Excel sheets, but also making the pipeline of like automating the Excel sheet updating, which is actually the harder part, and cleaning the data. And that's where I learned that like cleaning data is like a really big issue in the world right now. There's a lot of data and it's not in the way that's presentable. And so that's one of the major issues of the world. And the bigger reason why it's an issue is because people hate working with that. It's not fun. You don't really like gain a lot from that. So that's a big business opportunity right now, actually. But then JM Family was pretty awesome. Very cool. I worked with AI there too. They actually had a group of us present what the future dealership will look like. And so we made a presentation about that. Of course, I'd include some AI in there, just a simple like chatbot chatting, like customizing your car and then buying it online. But that was a really cool experience. And I would say the best part of that was that one of the higher up executives gave a talk to like 20 interns. And he was like, they're really transparent what they're doing. They're telling us how they're implementing AI and all this stuff. And I was like, this guy speaks my language because I'm very interested in AI. This is what I work on, right? And I actually started applying some of my RAG techniques to the software service Power BI that I was using there. And I learned way faster than other students or other interns. And so when this executive started to talk about AI, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool that they're doing this too. And it's cool to get the perspective of how big corporations are using how they were implementing AI. That's why I'm so confident in why I know how they're implementing it. And so after the talk, I actually went up to him and I was like, hey, can we get lunch sometime? Because like, I don't know, I guess a lot of interns there kind of cared about their careers and they're very uptight about it. And I was kind of more loose about it, which actually gave me an edge because I wasn't nervous to go talk to the executives. Like the other interns would be like, oh, it's like kind of a celebrity, like big shot guy. I'm really scared to go talk to him. But I was just like, hey, you want to get lunch one of these days? And he was like, yeah. It turned out he was like the CTO of the entire company and really cool guy. Now I have a reference if I never need anything. And that's definitely a hack for future interns out there. If someone cool gives a talk something like that, don't be afraid to reach out to them and ask them to get lunch because I guarantee you they'll probably say yes. And if they say no, then you're at the same place you were before. So it doesn't really hurt. It's zero risk.
And then as far as like the tech and the AI aspect of it, what was like the intersection between what you were learning and not just RAG, but in general, like the things we learn about in AI, what was the intersection between that, the company, what you were doing there, and maybe what you learned?
Well, what you'll learn in AI class, what a normal person will learn in AI class at school will be like how the models are trained and like how the data is labeled, which is kind of like, they don't really get into how the training works either, like the tokenizing, which is kind of the relevant stuff. They kind of tell you the irrelevant stuff, the stuff that doesn't even matter. Well, that's my experience at least. And so a lot of my experience has been RAG actually. So I had my own RAG app that I use personally that gave me an edge, that definitely gave me an edge while being an intern. But also I worked with a group internally at the company that they were implementing AI into their company. And they have a claims department. So if you get a dent in your car, you call into this, or you bring your car into the shop. And when they bring it to the shop, the mechanic calls the claims department. And it's like, this user has this dent. How much is it going to cost? Are they covered by it? And so we actually made a RAG application for that. So when a mechanic calls in, they don't have to call in anymore. They just type in the user's level, like membership, and then the dent of the car, or like the whatever dent they have, and we already know their car type. And so we pretty much do a search on if they're covered or not, and we present that in natural language, which was just doing RAG essentially. And so I helped do that. I learned a lot from that, but I learned mostly that if you're a kid and you really want to learn about something and you just watch a bunch of YouTube videos on it, like I did, you'll probably know more about it than the people working on it in corporations, because they're just grown people with families who are kind of over the new technology and they're like overwhelmed with it. And so I was a big part of that team, and that was pretty awesome to do.
Right. Something I'm really taking from this is that, so obviously it's never too late to start learning about tech, AI, coding, and you started your sophomore year a little bit before you started this internship. But a lot of the stuff that you probably noticed on this internship, a lot of the stuff you learned you wouldn't have had anything to draw a comparison to. You wouldn't have said, oh, this is an applied version of this thing that I've already learned. But because you already had that background, your experience was that much more useful. So something that I've taken from that, at least, it's important that you start before you get that internship, have that base of understanding. Would you say that that contributed a lot to what you gained from the internship?
Yeah, definitely. And I went in there thinking, I actually went in there with that goal a little bit. I wanted to see how they were implementing AI, because this is summer 2023 and everyone's talking about AI. And so I'm about to go to a large company. Hey, how are they using it? How can I help? Maybe how can I spin off one of their problems into my own company when I leave this internship? That was my mentality going in. And so just having mentality going in helped a lot. But then also working on that project beforehand definitely helped a lot. And just that can work for any field. It doesn't have to be AI. It could be literally any field. But going in there, dreaming big, and also trying to identify the company's problems, because if they're facing those problems, then other companies facing those problems, and that's a business opportunity.
That's a business opportunity. And the whole point of Techstrong Unplugged is getting people up to speed and keeping them up to speed. There are people who are just now finding out that ChatGPT is useful in their everyday lives, which I think we all use it now. But I'm saying that there's going to be another idea, probably could come out tomorrow. Let's say that somebody that like you might be using it the day after tomorrow, but somebody else in the world at the same school as us, maybe in the same classes, might not start using it until 2 years down the line. So that's the big thing, is about starting today, learning, having that base of knowledge, and then bringing that with you so that when new stuff comes out, you're ready to go with it. But anyway, Sean, great conversation. I really appreciate you joining the show. Is there anything else that you'd want to leave people with? Some words of advice, anything?
Not many words of advice. Keep grinding, keep learning, keep working. And I hope everyone is good in their careers. I hope I'm good in my career. So we'll see how it goes.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.